Well, hello and welcome to my latest YouTube vlog. And I am delighted to be here today to share a much needed conversation all about menopause in the workplace. Well, joining me today, I have Louise McGrath, who is a senior product manager at Bupa Health Clinics, and Janet Lindsay, the CEO of the amazing charity Wellbeing of Women. So a very warm welcome to you both. And I'm sure this is going to be an absolutely fascinating, enlightening and perhaps at sometimes enraging discussion. You are very, very welcome here. Can we kick off really talking about why we think there needs to be so much more attention drawn to this? You know, menopause is something that we do talk a lot about here at Earle Wellbeing. So why do you think that we need to put a bit more attention on menopause in the workplace and, you know, women's careers particularly? Lou, would you like to start us off on that?
Yeah, of course. I think, women are leaving their jobs and often their long-term careers because they feel that they can't cope with their symptoms in the workplace. Our research has found that around 1 million women have left their jobs due to menopause, and many who don't leave often end up taking extended periods of absence, which is impactful not only on the woman herself, but on the workforce and the business as a whole. And in my case, the impact on my mental health was probably the hardest thing for me to deal with. It started with brain fog, which, as I understand, is a pretty common symptom. And this meant that sometimes I couldn't even string a sentence together. And this quickly, ended up me feeling really anxious and having chest pains and panic attacks. And I ended up really, really stressed and actually extremely paranoid. I felt that, people that I'd worked with from years were talking about me, that they didn't think I was fit to do my job. It was all, it was all nonsense. But
Louise, how terrible. How old were you when this was happening?
51. But I
Yeah,
think
it's an absolutely classic age. I mean, it can happen obviously earlier than that, but that is absolute prime, isn't it? Prime time.
it is, yeah, yeah. I mean, there were times where I thought, you know what, I can't do this anymore. And I think on one occasion I actually wrote my resignation. But essentially my confidence was totally blown. I've never ever felt like this before, and I was pretty desperate and vulnerable, I think, to be
Yeah.
honest. It was horrendous.
That's really shocking that your study shows that 1 million people, women, are lost in the workplace through menopause. And you think of all that experience and knowledge and wisdom and
You lose that, yeah, just because people
yeah.
aren't there. Yeah, I agree.
Janet, I'm sure you've got some good facts and figures when it comes to all of this.
Thank you, Liz. Yes. I mean, you've talked about 900,000 or nearly 1 million women who leave the workplace. The estimates are that there's nearly 5 million women working aged between 45 to 60. And the majority of these women will be going through the perimenopause or menopause. And it just frequently coincides with the peak of their careers at a time when they are at their most successful and productive. Now, 3/4 of women will have symptoms, but about 1/4 of those will have severe symptoms. And as you've mentioned earlier, being anxious, brain fog, not sleeping well, fatigue, in addition to night sweats and hot flushes, those are just a few of the things that can really affect our ability to get the job done. And so it leads to underperforming, and that can drive more anxiety and lack of sleep. It becomes a vicious circle. So if you don't feel your employer is supportive, it means you start to be marginalised. And that's when people start to think about leaving the workplace.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, Lou, would you echo that in your own experience and also in kind of the effect generally on the workforce in this country and well, probably globally?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's women in that age group are the fastest growing demographic in the workplace, and women are leaving their jobs, but probably not before they've struggled to cope for some time with their symptoms. As you said, Janet, maybe they've become disengaged, their productivity or their focus has slipped, probably totally unexpectedly, and obviously all of this has a huge impact in terms of replacing that person, training them to the level that they need to. As you said, Liz, the experience, you lose all of that experience, and that doesn't even touch on the emotional impact, and often it's probably avoidable. So I think, raising awareness across the board, not just for women, is key. I think having support in place to help women through, for what for many is probably a horrendous experience. I think that employers are certainly in a position where that they can make a real difference. And from my own experience, my employer gave me a huge amount of support. They've been amazing, and they've enabled me to stay in the job I love. But I'm really conscious that, not everyone has that level of support open to them, unfortunately.
It's really interesting, you mentioning there about employer support, because it's really our line managers and our colleagues and the senior management who can really help here, can't they? Because, if men, for example, are aware, then, even younger men, an older man, I know, from talking to many men in business, have first-hand experience of it, because they often see their wives or their sisters or their partners go through something, and then they can recognize things that might be happening within female members of their teams. But, this is a message that needs to get out across the board, isn't it, to all levels of employers, because ultimately, women are, business assets, and we need people to be good decision makers, as well as, you say, the human impact of what's happening and unavoidable suffering. It can be avoidable. It's not unavoidable. It should be being dealt with. Janet, do you think that there is more that businesses can and should be doing here? How do you see that working out as a charity?
Yes, we definitely do. We believe that all organisations can and should support women affected by the menopause. And that's why we're introducing a pledge. It's called the Menopause Workplace Pledge. It's simple. We're asking all organisations to commit to it, and 3 parts to it. That we're asking them to recognise that the menopause can be an issue in the workplace and that women need support, to talk openly, like we are today, positively, again, as we are, and respectfully about the menopause. And this bit, which is so important, to commit to actively support and inform all employees affected by the menopause, but beyond that. And I think that we'd like to go further. We would like to see all organisations have policies in place. But I think let's start with a simple pledge that people can get involved in. I would say that we are really excited and encouraged, actually, to hear from a large number of organisations who really do want to be active in this space and help. So, and they will be helping, straightforwardly 5 million women working in the workplace, but they'll also be helping all those who are coming through beforehand, making sure that they really are, at their most successful and productive when they're going through the menopause.
Do you have any practical advice, Lou, on actually how women can approach their employers on this, and also vice versa, how employers can then talk to their teams?
Yeah, I think it may seem a bit daunting. It certainly was for me. I have a male manager, and I think it was probably more desperation than courage that led me to reaching out. As I said before, I did actually write my resignation, and I phoned him to tell him that I was planning to leave, but I ended up just a blubbering mess, to be honest, and crying my eyes out. And basically I just said to him, I can't cope. And in hindsight, I wish I'd done it sooner, because my manager has been extremely supportive. He knew a little bit about menopause, because as a business, it's something that we've been, starting to talk about. But what he didn't know, he researched. He joined menopause webinars. I recall one. I recall one where there was hundreds of women on a webinar and about 3 or 4 men, and he was one of them. But he gave me options. He gave me options in terms of the times I worked. He told me if it got too much, just put your out of office on. And when my doctor actually recommended that I take a step back for a couple of weeks, I was obviously, with the paranoia and everything, I was actually really concerned about that. But he was great. He said, treat it like annual leave. Prepare a handover if it makes you feel better, and then just give yourself a wee bit of breathing space. But probably the biggest takeaway for me was when he said, you've got this. I've got your back. We've got this, and I'm really, really grateful actually for the support I've had.
Fantastic. I mean, Janet, I know your charity is very female focused, obviously well-being of women, but engaging men in all of this does seem to be a real key factor, doesn't it?
Absolutely, totally. And actually, a lot of men feel excluded, not deliberately, but they just don't know a lot about it. And I think the words we use are normalizing the conversation. If we start talking about it, and there is a safe space for women to talk about their issues with someone who understands and will listen and won't judge them, then it's really going to help. Because one of the things we found, we've done a lot of listening to women. We are led by women's voices. And the more that the menopause is discussed, then the more that destigmatization comes along, and women don't feel so nervous, anxious, or sometimes even scared to talk about it. But bringing men in is vital, and they want to be brought in, to be honest with you. Once you give them the opportunity to learn and understand, it's going to help them, because after all, what we all want is to have a workplace that feels happy, that it's diverse, it's inclusive, and that we really are looking at the health and well-being of everybody we work with. And the other thing, of course, is it addresses the gender pay gap.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you're right there, that it is having those open conversations and normalizing the word. I remember interviewing a professor up in Leicester, and he said, one of the biggest things I can tell you is please say to everybody in your conversations every day, mention the word menopause 3 or 4 times a day, just get it in there. And I think, when we think back as employers, particularly with the workplace, how we didn't really talk about pregnancy, we didn't talk about breastfeeding, we didn't talk about postnatal depression. And it's only by talking about it, isn't it, that we can normalize it and take away this fear and this shame and this stigma and the embarrassment that we might feel, particularly with male colleagues and managers who aren't family after all. So, you are talking on quite a vulnerable level, aren't you? Kind of quite opening up here.
Yeah, they're very intimate conversations that you're having with people. And so it's always difficult to start that conversation, which is why we want employers to really take the lead and actually give women the space and the safe place to talk about it. But we always say, involve all your staff in the conversation when you're setting policies or trying to look for initiatives. And in particular, in this case, do talk to the women, because, women are part of the solution here, but men are too. I mean, it really is important to bring them both in. So anybody who's looking at bringing in a policy or new initiatives, the best place to start is within your organisation. And it really doesn't matter how small or how big you are. I mean, we've been blown away by the support we've had in 24 hours. So organisations like Tesco, which employs women in the warehouse, on the checkout tills, drivers in their vans going around, as well as just in their office. Bupa and many more, PwC. So it is something, and we are encouraged by the fact that employers do really want to talk about it. They want to get involved, and I think they do want to help. It's something that's very much in the media spotlight at the moment. And so I think we've got to strike while the iron's hot and really get out there, spread the word, normalise this conversation, and make sure that all women have the opportunities and reach the potential they deserve.
Yeah, I think making that Liz, taking that first step and opening up, that first level, it kind of for me was like opening the floodgates, and then I felt quite comfortable, having that sort of conversation, and even sort of making little jokes about my menopausal brain sometimes because I couldn't get my sentences out. But it does make it easier just taking that first step, I think.
Yeah. Well, I know that in a previous vlog, I talked at length about the Bupa menopause plan for individual women. Can you explain a little bit, Louise, about how the Bupa plan can also help businesses here?
Yeah, our menopause plan is of course available to businesses as well as to consumers, and we already have a number of customers who who are already buying it to support their people. The services, it provides fast access to a menopause trained GP. I actually used the service myself, and I must say I found it really empowering. I wasn't even aware that a lot of the symptoms that I was experiencing were menopause related. And the time, you get a significant amount of time with the doctor that you can actually, discuss everything that's on your mind. And we talked about things like medication and HRT and things that I could do to help myself. So it was really, really worthwhile. I mean, ultimately, the plan was created to support women and give them access to treatment that they need to empower them to take control of their symptoms. And that's certainly what I took away from it. And of course, we're extremely proud to be given 5% of every sale to wellbeing of women to support further research into groundbreaking treatment for women and girls.
It's a win-win-win, isn't it, all the way around for everybody, for women, for businesses, for the charity. It's just great. Janet, can we just perhaps finish on highlighting some of the ways in which the access to treatment will help women at work, because that's the ultimate goal, isn't it?
Absolutely. So what we're saying is talk to your staff, talk to women first of all, and actually ask them what they want. But it can be as simple as having access to a fan. It can be making sure that they have access to a cooler room, cool water. I mean, one thing that COVID has done in a really positive way is this word flexible working. I mean, we now all work in very different ways. And I think that's one of the things that women would like going forward in terms of their own work situation. So if it means they come in later when when perhaps, it's not quite so busy on public transport, really what they're after is just small. They tend to be very small things that organisations need to think about. But they just make such a difference to keeping staff. And to me, it's just a win-win situation. There is nothing worse than losing a really talented member of staff. Not only are they going away not feeling very good about themselves or indeed where they work, but actually it is that loss of productivity. If we can keep women working, and let's be honest, some women are the sort of primary breadwinner. So if they're thinking of leaving the workplace, that's not going to be very helpful for them and their families. So really, they are simple ways that you can help.
Yeah. Well, I'm just delighted that there is getting to be so much more good news and more awareness and more help. And, personally, a big thank you to both of you for joining us here today. I'm a huge fan, Bupa, of your menopause plan. I think it's brilliant. I've talked to so many doctors who do it, and that access to personal one-to-one care, is just invaluable and life-changing. And Janet, the work that you're doing, I know we've connected before on different occasions, is just so great, and it's lovely to reconnect here and really wave the flag and help so many women in midlife and beyond, and their families and their businesses. So thank you very much indeed for being here today.
Well, thank you, Liz, and thank you, Bupa. I mean, the work that you've done, Liz, over the years is amazing. Raising awareness, education, and just being that sort of person people think that's on the end of the radio, the phone, or whatever. It's so helpful, that support. Really. So thank you. Thank you, Bupa.
Thank you. See you again, guys.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.